What is up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, and this is the Wolf of All Streets podcast. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, author, and the undisputed king of controversial hot takes. With his unique thoughts on history, politics, and race, Hotep has garnered the attention from Fox News, Joe Rogan, Vice, and more. I intend to dig deep today into what makes him tick, his thoughts on politics and race in America, and why he's seemingly taken the red pill and exited the matrix. I'm also really interested in where he thinks Bitcoin fits into the equation, of course. Hotep Jesus, man, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Scott.
Yeah, of course. So before we get into the questions, I have to remind everyone once again, this is the Wolf of All Streets podcast. I'm your host, Scott Melker. And twice a week, we talk to your favorite personalities from the worlds of Bitcoin, finance, trading, art, music, sports, and politics. Show is powered by Blockworks Group, a media company with over 20 podcasts in their network. You can check them out at blockworksgroup.io. And if you follow the podcast, follow me on Twitter, then you should definitely check out my website newsletter. That's at thewolfofallstreets.io. And that is it for that part. So, man, I got to ask you, did you earn yourself free coffee for life at Starbucks or what?
I wish. I'm having a cappuccino from the Bucks right now, actually.
So, man, tell me the Starbucks story, because I know that went hugely viral. I saw you were on Fox News talking about it. I mean, crazy. What was that about?
Trolling, nice little prank. I saw that some gentlemen had some real legit issues with a Starbucks experience. Police were called on them, which is something that's not out of the ordinary when you're Black in America. But the response to it, I felt, was hyperbolic, to say the least. And I was just like, oh, it's not that serious. Like, it's a problem that we're accustomed to, but the huge uproar, I was just like, wow, is it really that serious? So I took advantage of it and turned it into a media opportunity. And prior to that, there's two predictions I made. I said, is there a possibility that, I could get on Fox News? And the other thing it turned out to be a prediction was, I said, if you follow a liberal narrative, they'll push you to the upper ranks of society and give you high visibility. And both of those things came to be true with my stunt.
That's interesting. Like, were you a fan of Fox News, or it was more like just a challenge to obviously get yourself exposure there?
I knew that I wasn't welcome at the left-wing media, pretty much blackballed. So my only hope to get any mainstream visibility and to reach the homes of America was through Fox News. It was the last place that I could possibly be welcome to and have a voice at. So that's why I took aim at it.
That's a really crazy story. So, I mean, how did this all start? Obviously, like, everybody sort of grows into their, like I said, I mentioned, you've said you take the red pill, you kind of detach from the matrix, you have this grand awakening. How did that all happen for you? Because I think it comes at different points in different people's lives, or most likely never, right? I mean, most people just never get there.
Yeah. So I like to say I was born Hotep. My dad had given me a lot of material to read. Some of them was on the AIDS conspiracy. And my father was ex-military. He was in the intelligence section of the military. So there were stories he would tell me that pretty much expanded my mind. And he basically, at a very early age, planted the seeds that what you see in the media is not exactly real. What you understand about this world and what's popular to understand about this world is not real. So he planted those seeds real early. Now, the specifics of it all, I've taken to another level with my studies. But I think, some contributing things were like Alex Jones contributed to the red pill. A documentary by called The Ring of Power contributed greatly. And the documentary Zeitgeist, and some 9/11 documentaries and things, and, kind of just took me to the next level of the red pill. And then there's higher levels to that.
I always find it interesting where you draw the line, not you specifically, but an individual draws the line on what is like acceptable conspiracy theory and what is just like going too far. Because obviously, like, some things we see are true, right? I mean, I'm not saying in the media necessarily. Some things are true. Some things are obviously false. How do you discern, what you view as truth and what you view as conspiracy?
Well, I don't know if conspiracy is the antithesis to truth. There
Right.
are, conspiracy, and then there's conspiracy so-called theory. But there are, in fact, conspiracies, and that is truth. Now, what you decipher as truth has to be extrapolated from the studies. For example, when we talk about socialism and communism, some people would describe socialism as the workers having owning the means of production. And then when I try to think that through logistically, it seems like a large nightmare, because how does a group of people manage resources without some sort of centralized planning, which led me to the realization that socialism and communism can be succinctly defined as centralization of power. So, nobody taught me that. It was me asking, hey, how can I read up? How can I learn more about socialism? I go and study the Russian Revolution, which is probably the dawn of modern socialism and communism. And I created that definition on my own for what I know to be true. For example, they, I believe it was the Communist Manifesto, push for centralized banking. No, actually, no, it's not the Communist Manifesto. It's Lenin. Lenin is the one who said that, I think he said 90% of communism requires installing a central bank, which supports my argument that socialism and communism is basically just centralization of power. So truth, there's accepted truth, and then there's your own truth. What is accepted truth? You have to read the room and kind of see what that is. And you can kick the bee's nest sometimes. You'll tweet something and you'll quickly find out that's not acceptable. There are certain things when you speak to a conservative crowd that are acceptable and unacceptable. And same thing with liberals. Obviously, it's a lot easier to offend liberals and progressives and socialists than it is to offend conservatives, because there are just more things that offend liberals. It's not really hard. With conservatives, there are things you can do to kick the bee's nest over there as well. It's just much easier to kick the bee's nest than liberals. So, that's why I think Twitter is powerful. Me having a large platform is powerful, because I can tweet something and then quickly read the room and say, oh, okay, this is, here's what I've studied. Here's what I've found to be true. And, let me throw this into the piranha tank and see who bites. And then you can read those reactions and see what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
It's interesting, as a trader, like, I view sentiment as a huge part of the information that I use, obviously, to, as you said, to gauge the room, to decide where price is likely to go. I mean, every time I look at a chart, I'm looking at it and thinking, where are people going to be scared? Where are people going to be greedy? You know what I mean? And it sounds like that's kind of how you treat Twitter and people, is like, you might throw out a hot take, like I mentioned in the intro, or something that, you're just trying to gauge the reaction and see what's going to happen, right? It may not even be fully what you believe. You just want to see how people are going to respond to it. Is that true?
Partly. What I tweet is what I believe.
Right.
I don't feign anything. It's just that sometimes I know what's going to kick the bee's nest, but it all started from accidentally kicking the bee's nest. I'm like, oh, look, I found this piece of information. This is so cool. Let me share. And then you share it, and it's just like, rah, and it's just like, oh, wait,
Dude.
Okay. You guys don't like that. All right. I wasn't allowed to say it. I didn't know you felt so adamant about that. For example, if I want to kick the bee's nest with the right, all I have to do is just type in, I love reparations, right? Or I want my reparations. And they're going to be like, oh, no, you don't need reparations. And it's just like, oh, okay. So, as a Black person, you have to stick to the talking points when you're with the right, and you have to stick to the talking points when you're with the left. So there's this accepted truth, and then your own self-truth, and what you choose to share is going to shape people's perception of you. And by what you share, you can use that perception to your advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah, we talked about,
I believe.
Yeah, we talked about, obviously, your feelings on socialism and communism. But what are your feelings on the two-party system in general? Because a lot of people would argue, obviously, they're kind of flip sides of the same coin. It's all the same sort of big machine. Should there be a third party? Should we not have a two-party system? Do you think that people should be able to blindly associate with one or the other's all of their beliefs? I find it very hard to put myself in a basket of the comprehensive beliefs of either side personally.
Yeah. I can loosely be described as an anarcho-capitalist. So I don't like any parts of the government. I don't think the state should exist at all. So both parties to me are complete and utter trash. But I think there's a upper level and there's a lower level, right? Like there's the establishment right and left, and then there's the people right and left. I'm much more closely aligned and more empathetic to the woes of the right or conservatives. I'm probably more in alignment with libertarians. Right. But, people have been snubbed by the Libertarian Party, so I don't like any of these parties. What I think people should think about is a piece of history where there was a third party that emerged and almost won an election. I can't remember what year. I have to go back through my studies and find it. But there was an anti-Freemason party that became really popular because the people at that time understood that both parties were controlled by Freemasonry. So they wanted somebody who wasn't of that cult or cabal and exclusive group of people. So when I look at the two parties, I don't see the past being much different than the present in that regards, because both of these groups are essentially controlled by the people with the money, whatever class that may be.
How do we change it?
Well, Andrew Breitbart says politics is downstream from culture. So if you want to change anything in this country, you have to change the culture. I think a lot of it has to deal with practicing empathy. For example, the left has many legitimate gripes, and socialists have many legitimate gripes. I think where socialists go wrong is with their solutions for these problems. But I think where the right goes wrong is with, or both sides really, they go wrong. They're not tolerant of opposing opinions. There's no empathy. There's no sympathy. There's no humanity. The left definitely doesn't have any humanity left, but there's no listening, right? So when I speak to a leftist, the first thing I want to do is find all the places where we align and start from there. It seems that when we have these conversations, first of all, I mean, the left is quite visceral in their reactions to everything. So, when you're dealing with emotional people, you'll have to first practice empathy, and then you can kind of pull them to your side and position yourself as an ally as opposed to an enemy. And then when they see that, hey, look, this guy isn't an enemy. He's not here to combat me. He really wants to learn and understand this. And then we can find some sort of common ground. We can kind of move from there. The problem is that the right is basically a reaction to the left. The left controls all the conversations. If the left is talking about abortion, the right's going to talk about abortion. If the left's talking about Trump, the right's going to talk about Trump. So the left is playing. They're like Alex Trebek, and the right are the contestants, and they're reacting to whatever Alex Trebek says the topics we're going to discuss are. And that's the problem, and that's kind of like where Hotep's different, where, we know what we're trying to do. There's a mantra amongst us called Hotep and Build. So, we focus on technology and building startups and economics and finance. So when you deal with us, you already know what our goals are and what our mission and what our agenda is. Whereas the right, it's kind of like their mission is whatever is in juxtaposition to whatever the left is. It's like, well, I think what means a lot to you is like two-way and family. So I would just hammer home on those 2 points. But to get back to the Andrew Breitbart point about culture, I think people have to really check the culture of their family, and then their culture of behavior online. I know the left is going to act like 2-year-olds, and sometimes the right feeds into that. The one thing about a 2-year-old is you never want to feed into their emotions, because when you feed into their emotions, you validate them. And the right does a poor job of validating that. I mean, well, they do a great job of validating that. And I think that's a poor decision. I think the right should just stick to what they believe to be true, their religion, their Christianity, their family, and stick to those talking points and control the conversation instead of letting the left control the conversation.
Where does the name Hotep come from?
It was given to us. The actual definition means to be at peace, rest, satisfaction. I'm a student of Shaka Agmos, Nah Valley movement. And so for us, Hotep was a greeting. And then right around the time Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, and all of them died, Black Lives Matter emerged. Third wave feminism became stronger, and it became much stronger amongst Black people and Black women. So around that time, I sympathized with the death of Mike Brown, the death of Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice. And I saw that as an ongoing problem in America. I think where the road forked was in the solutions to the problem. For example, I remember tweeting, "Hey guys, we should boycott the NFL." And I was lambasted and ostracized for the idea of that. And here we are years later, and everybody's taking aim at the NFL, post Kaepernick, right? And I said things like, "Hey, let's boycott Nike," because they're in the pockets of China. I said this years ago. I burnt my Nikes in like 2011 or something like that on video, and it's called Daddy Boston Winter. And with our and I think the core solution to all of this was build economics, and I think that's the same solution for the right is build your educational institutions and stop depending on the left, or if we're talking about Black people, stop depending on white people to educate your children, and then create your own businesses to support your own family, your own farming, your own food sources, so on and so forth. And that was my reaction to it. And the left's reaction to that was, well, white supremacy is still going to exist, and we have to deconstruct the patriarchy and deconstruct the system of white supremacy. And I'm just like, no, that's not exactly a solution. So their response to me was to call me Hotep. And I'm like, you can't be a Hotep. It means like peace. And we use it as a greeting or an exit, good night. After 1,000 people calling me Hotep, I was like, fine, screw it. We're Hoteps now. So it went from, a greeting to a noun. They're using it as a pejorative, but we grabbed the term and exalted it to give it a better meaning. And then at that time, I was going through a very deep spiritual awakening, and I was speaking or tweeting straight from my soul. And so somebody said, "What are you, some type of Hotep Jesus?" And I was just like, "Oh, it's kind of got a ring to it. You know what I am." And then that's where we are now.
It's bold to take the name Jesus and make it your own.
Yeah. You have to enter into action with boldness. There's a lot of negative that can come along with taking on a name like Jesus. But if you believe in yourself, you believe in your mission, and you practice subconscious conditioning, such as what is it that Napoleon Hill teaches? I forget. Autosuggestion. You practice autosuggestion. The negative ramifications that come along with these things don't apply to you because you're not thinking about them. They apply to everybody else, but they don't apply to me. I've embraced the name Jesus. And I love the story of Jesus. I'm not Christian anymore. I don't identify as Christian, although I was raised Catholic and confirmed Catholic. It's not any diss to Christians. It's not any diss to Jesus. I'm not trying to replace Jesus. But I think it's the fact that the guy's name wasn't even Jesus, right? So it's like, it's also pointing out people's ignorance, because when people say, hey, you're using this name Jesus, and it was all like Jesus, technically was also another name for Joseph. And then we can get into the whole thing about the letter J didn't exist and whatever have you. But I think the real name was Yahweh or Yeshua or Yod He Vav He, which is Hebrew.
God, yeah.
Which could also be construed with the Tetragrammaton, and there's some mathematical applications to that name as well. There's a lot of things I know about the story of Jesus that are not mainstream. So I feel like when it comes to Jesus, I have more intellectual prowess over it than the people who covet him.
So you touched on something earlier, which I think that this audience will really be interested in hearing your thoughts on. So you were talking about Lenin and the central bank. Mm-hmm. We talk about the central bank here all the time. So what do you make of current monetary and fiscal policy, the behavior of the central banks? And is it a train that's out of control or something that can be stopped?
Is it a train that's out of control and can it be stopped?
I mean, there's hard to stop printing.
Yeah, I mean, there's two responses to that, right? There's an optimistic one and there's a pessimistic one. I'm a realist, so I'm going to go ahead and say it's not going to be stopped. I mean, you can't even stop the left from criticizing you for identifying as just male and female. So how are you going to stop this huge system of central banking when you can't even handle these pussy hat wearing people, right? So it also, like the central bank is probably the foremost problem in America. And the conversation is never there. The conversation is always redirected to something else that's lower down the totem pole of the power structure. So until people can stay focused and say, hey, let's focus on this beast here and let's do something about this, I don't see that happening. I mean, people don't understand what money is. People don't study economics. So you're dealing with, I think what the powers that be do a great job of is keeping people dumb. So when you're dealing with the dumb population, it's easy to control. And, I'd say like 80% of the population is just really stupid, even the ones that are so-called educated. We call them paper on the wall Negroes. And they got their college degrees. To me, I hear them talk and I'm just like, Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. There's no substance at all. So, unless you can figure out a way to massively educate the public, the Fed will always exist. But I'm not, to be honest with you, I don't see, I'm not too concerned with how the Fed operates. I mean, this system, I have a new book coming out too, where I actually go into the relationship between the state and the money men. And this isn't actually new. This goes back to, I want to say in my studies, like 15th century. I mean, the dawn of the stock exchange starts at, I want to say the 17th or 16th century. And, the printing of banknotes, what's the word I'm looking for? Stock jobbing. Stock jobbing was a practice for a really long while, and manipulating money has been around, I want to say, since the 13th century. So this isn't a new thing. I just think fractional reserve banking might be new as far as the last 200 years are concerned. I know the Central Bank pretty much took power in 1913. But when you have people who believe in the state, that's what you get, and then when you mention, hey, look, like, you should check out this thing called anarchism. People have been perfectly made ignorant to what anarchy is or could be. So therefore, they are status. And if you're a status, then central bank is what you're going to get.
Right. You talk about people don't understand what money is. And basically, you're saying that if you're a status, you don't question your money because you trust your government inherently, and therefore you trust the money, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're trusting these elected officials to make decisions on your behalf. But these people are in the pockets of corporations, which again goes back to the relationship of the trader with the king. So it's like, who should you pay attention to more? Should you pay attention to the politicians, or should you pay attention to the corporations if the corporations are the one that's funding your state? So I think people need to pay attention to how the corporations and the banks work, and direct their focus at them, and ignore the state completely. I think that if people had more control over their ego, the state would become obsolete. The state only exists because people don't know how to act.
Talk about anarchy then. What does it mean to you when you state that it's not probably what everybody's common perception of is? Because obviously that's a triggering word for most people, right? You hear anarchy and you picture people running around lighting fires and shooting guns in the air or something, you know?
They've done a great job of making anarchy become synonymous with chaos. But depending on what dictionary you check, it actually could be defined as a utopian society. But I think what it really means is just the lack of existence of the state. I think to get a better understanding of this, you should probably check out Michael Malice. You should probably check out Rothbard and the Mises Institute. You know, I'm followed by the Mises Institute. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. You know, I'm new to this concept of anarchy because I was one of those people who were brainwashed before. When I saw the word anarchy, I was just like, oh, no, what are you talking about? You know, like, we need this state, until somebody was like, hey, check this out. And I read it. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I totally get it. But I think that goes back to me being an open-minded person, where if you're ready to present me some information, I'll take a look at it, you know? But I had never understood the relationship between the people and the state.
I mean, I think anarchy is on kind of the same trajectory as atheist, right? Like when I was young, an atheist, like people, it was a word that was just looked down on, and people thought you were nuts. And I kind of came to that conclusion in my life, you know, on my own. And I think that it was a misconstrued word, and it's largely ends up people who, think critically about their environment and come to a decision, whether other people agree with that or not. And anarchy, as I've understood it, as you described it, kind of has the same negative connotation, but the reality of what people think it is not what it could ideally be. But I think the question then becomes, what does a world with no state look like? How does it function?
So I want to touch on, you said, what is that thing called where you don't believe in God again?
Atheism. I mean, some people some people are agnostic, some people are atheists, some people, whatever.
I would say that concept today is much more widely accepted in the United States than anarchy is. And I think that's my point. I think that atheism was pushed by the ruling class, because a large part of culture is your belief in a higher power. And I think that when people don't have something to believe in higher than themselves, you start to get a lack of control over the ego. But let's answer your question, right? Like, what does it look like without the state? I don't know. Right. That's what I would have to first and foremost say. How it could operate would be small citadels and regions and villages and cities that operate how people choose to live their lives. You know, so if we want to have our own coin or currency, we'll trade, grass or cows or whatever it is. If we want to practice an LGBT lifestyle, we'll do that. If we want to practice, guns and, whatever, we should be able to do that. I think it's just everybody needs to be able to live under their own terms. And if you don't like how things are where you live, then you have the option to move where things more closely align with your values and what you want in life.
I mean, that sounds like the ideal situation if it was like that. I mean, I have to think that largely, at least initially, the reality would be a lot more tribalism and war and infighting. And, they have water, we don't. They have this, we don't. You know what I mean? Because obviously it's hard without some sort of centralized authority to distribute, goods and resources and things like that. Not saying it can't be done. It was done in the past. But, I despise the government and politics, you know what I mean? But I don't know if I can go 180 degrees the other direction either, where it's back to like Mad Max and Gastown and Watertown, so I don't know what the in-between is.
Yeah, I don't think it would look like Mad Max. I think we fail to give people credit for being naturally good. I think it's the interference of the state that makes people naturally bad now. When you say distribution of resources, the government does a very poor job of distribution of resources. Like Eric July would say, fuck them hoe ass roads. I mean, if you allowed people to police themselves and manage themselves, I think the roads would be in much better condition. I think the water supply would be in much better condition. I think that if we allowed people to live without restrictions of some sort of overlord or state, people would live much better. Now, there is going to be a fight potentially over resources. Your side has, more water. But I also think that you have to look at the converse where it says there may be an increased opportunity for cooperation, whereas the state often restricts cooperation. You need a license to do this, like I have paid $30,000 to hire an attorney just to open up a Bitcoin exchange. Right. And that's at the low end. Right. And the bulk of that money is to get licensed in New York City. So those types of things are what make people angry. When Tanisha wants to open up her hair salon, but she has to get a license to do so, to do hair, it becomes really, you're stopping people's upward mobility. I think without those communist restrictions, I think we have a happier society. Just people want to live how they want to live. The government is even like you look at police, like police aren't here to protect us. They're here to police us and protect property. They're here to protect the corporations. They're not exactly here to protect people. When you ride down the road, you're not looking at an officer and saying, oh, cool, I feel safe. You're saying, oh, let me check my speed limit to make sure I don't get a ticket, right? That the police are actually an oppressive entity, and they're an extension of the state. They're agents of the state. I think we remove some of these things and we turn to your own private police force. The police will actually be there to protect you and not ticket you. And I think people will be a lot happier without the existence of the state.
Well, do you think that people should fear corporations more than they fear the state then?
No. The corporations are, the state empowers corporations. They call it crony capitalism. I call crony capitalism exploitation of socialist systems. The corporations say, hey, look, all right, I have the capital to make X, Y, and Z happen. Now, if there are no restrictions, there's going to be an increase in competition. So how do I destroy competition? Well, let me lobby in Congress to create restrictions so that the little guy can't compete with me, right? And that's what corporations do. They use the state to hold people down. It's not the corporations without the state wouldn't have as much power.
RoundTheX.com is one of my favorite companies in the entire crypto space. What they do is take all your small purchases and round them up to the nearest dollar and invest that spare change into any of over 30 crypto assets of your choice. They integrate with your favorite exchanges so that you can view various exchange balances all in one dashboard and round up into different assets all at the same time. And they do all this without ever holding any of your Bitcoin. This is by far the best way to dollar cost average into Bitcoin. Go to roundthex.com and use the promo code WOLF for $4 in free Bitcoin after making your first roundup or purchase. That's ROUNDLYX.com and code WOLF for $4 in free Bitcoin. Diginex is making huge moves and is soon to be the first crypto exchange listed on the NASDAQ. This means that people will finally be able to invest on a platform they're comfortable with without being directly exposed to Bitcoin. Absolutely massive for mainstream adoption. Diginex has basically everything investors need under a single roof, including an institutional-grade exchange called Equus. Equus allows institutional and retail investors alike access to an exchange that's on par with platforms they've come to trust in other markets. This means they are compliant with regulation, transparent and fair with regards to fees and orders, secure and far ahead of the curve in regards to innovation. Go to equus.com/wolf to get 5% off trading fees. That's EQUOS.com/WOLF to get 5% off of your trading fees. Sign up now. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard about the DeFi craze in crypto. By far the safest and simplest way to passively earn in the space is to hold your coins on Celsius. You can earn your rewards in the same crypto you're holding, or you can earn even more in their Cell token. Right now, I choose to earn 5% on Ethereum in Ethereum and 15% on my stable coins in Cell token. It's a little bit better than the sub 1% interest rates you can earn in a legacy bank account. Celsius was founded with the belief that crypto is the opportunity to really shake up the financial system. They're changing the standards for all financial services. They share 80% of their revenue in the form of weekly reward payments. That's how their users are earning up to 15% APY with compounding rewards. They also commit to providing the lowest cost loans on the market. Their loans start at just 1% APR. For just 1% interest, you can borrow cash against your crypto and avoid selling, which also eliminates the taxable event. It's absolutely huge. High rewards on your holdings and low interest on loans on a platform whose mission you can believe in. Celsius is giving $20 to every new user that joins with promo code WOLF. Just enter the code in the app during registration. $20 is awarded after 30 days of maintaining a wallet balance of $200 or more. Visit celsius.network, that's CELSIUS.network, and use promo code WOLF, WOLF. So to that end, we fear the corporations because they're using the state to oppress people.
Right.
So that's kind of what I was getting at. So how do you escape from this system? We talk about taking the red pill. I want to talk about Bitcoin, how you discovered Bitcoin and what its role is in separating yourself from these entities.
Yeah. I don't have too much interest in separating from the system. I think I'm more concerned with mastering the system. I think it's a very brilliant game that was created by the money men. And the game is basically designed for the intelligent. It's not racist. I don't think it's classist. I don't know what the word is, but there's probably a word for this. It's brainist, right? It's like we're going to separate the intellectual from the stupid. We're going to separate the unambitious for the ambitious. So, when we look at, Wall Street, people would look at it as an oppressive entity. And in some ways I can agree, but in other ways I'm like, I trade options and I do well trading options, right? And I have a stock portfolio and I do well over there. So I think the system is set up for the intelligent. If you're going to sit down and take the time to understand this complicated system and its new language, you can do well. So I'm not really too concerned with destroying the system. I think it's more or less mastering the system and then using your mastery to create something that's better to make the old system obsolete. And then people go, oh, wait, I kind of like the way they're living over there. Let's do it this way, right? I think that's the problem. People are so concerned with destroying the system instead of building a new way, because even if you destroy the system, what's the new way? You don't want to push us back to square zero.
That's why I was asking you about what happens after the state, right? It's one thing to destroy it. It's another thing to have nothing better to go to.
Right. And that's why, like when I say loosely, I'm an anarchist, and it's not that I want to get rid of the state, although I'd like to see it disappear. I'm more concerned with what's the better way and building that better way. And then again, making the state obsolete. And that's how you would dissolve the state is by making that new idea better. As far as Bitcoin is concerned, I knew about Bitcoin pretty much probably right from the start. I made a very foolish decision of not owning Bitcoin. I think I actually have some somewhere from back then that I can't even find, and I think somebody gave it to me. But I don't know where that is right now. And I wish I did. But anyway, my response initially was like, the big banks are going to kill this. I'm not interested. Right. And in many ways that's true. But I think it was 2017 when it had the big boom. And, I pay attention to things. So I got in and I made a decent bag. I remember it was December or November, and I was hanging out with the family, and my friend said, yeah, they're talking about this cryptocurrency thing down at the barbershop.
Time to sell.
Yeah. So, we were talking. He's like, well, what do you think I should do? I was like, just start off like $100. He's like, nah, man, I'm trying to get rich. I'm about to go all in. And I think he took like $20K out of his 401k, and the next year it tanked, and he was just like sick to his stomach. But meanwhile, I was telling him the whole way, like, don't look at Bitcoin like that. But I come from a traditional investing background. So I invested in Bitcoin with traditional investing discipline, which is why I knew kind of like what the top was. And then when I saw gains, you see in the stock market, like, you don't see gains of 100% unless you're trading like options, right? You don't see those types of gains. You're happy with 13%. You're happy with
10% a year, man. You're going to be rich.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Rich.
So when you see when I saw my portfolio and that shit said 1,000%, I'm like, dude, I already won. So I went to Twitter and I was just like, yo, I'm selling. And people are like, oh, you're crazy. It's going to keep going
That's
up.
how
I'm
you know you're right.
Yeah. So, when they said that, I was like, I really don't care, because I come from a traditional background of investing, and 1,000% is unheard of. So I made my bag. And if it goes up more, I'll be sick. But at least I know I made money and didn't lose. So a lot of people, lost out because they weren't traditional investors. They were Bitcoin investors, and they don't understand investing. I studied Benjamin Graham, The Intelligent Investor, really long and boring read, but very insightful.
I've read it. Yep.
Yeah, great book. And then I had a kid that was teaching me the stock market and telling me do's and don'ts and so on and so forth, and telling me about index funds and how they work. And Ray Diallo, I think his name is, I studied a little bit of his stuff. But then, I'm looking at Bitcoin now, and everybody's like, oh, Bitcoin's going to save the world. And I'm like, I got bridges to sell you if you want one. They come in red, white, and blue. If you think cryptocurrency is going to save the world, you got another thing coming. Establishment money is controlling the Bitcoin market right now. If you don't think so, if you don't think they've already.
We got guys like Paul Tudor Jones, and corporations are investing their, they're taking their reserves and buying Bitcoin, which, by the way, I don't think is a bad thing. But these are the biggest Wall Street guys you're going to find. So obviously their money is there. Right. And I don't believe that Bitcoin is going to save the world, but I certainly believe it can save an individual.
How?
Well, if the other systems fail and they have exposure, I'm not saying they should be all in, but the idea that you should have something idiosyncratic, something that, has a different risk profile and is uncorrelated, that could go up when everything else goes down. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying it's a good idea to be exposed to something that can give you that sort of potential.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people, when investing, you want to diversify your portfolio. That's very basic.
How do you diversify your portfolio with stocks, bonds, and dollars anymore? So it's really hard to find things that I find are truly diverse at this point. And maybe Bitcoin won't be. I don't know. It's shown some correlation, but in general, I think it's the best shot at having something that could that could rise when everything else falls, if that happens.
Yeah, we just saw PayPal, right? Like, PayPal is saying next year they're going to integrate, and you saw the spike, how the market reacted to that. So I think Bitcoin is going to become a norm. But I don't think the establishment is bringing in Bitcoin as a necessity. I think they're doing it because they want to track you, right? They want to be able to watch the money better. And that's exactly what the ledger does. It allows them to watch the money better and track everything we do. I mean, Alex Jones has been saying for years that they're going to install a one world digital currency.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's exactly what Bitcoin is. It's a one world digital currency. And in many ways, I'm like, are we going to get rid of physical money? And I'm just like, I kind of like stuffing, a few bands underneath my bed, my mattress, right? Like I like having that physical money for reasons I don't want to explain right now, right? But
I mean, everybody wants to be able to transact privately.
Yeah.
Everybody should. Everybody should.
Exactly. When we look at the Greek diners that are owned in New Jersey, these people transact in all cash, and for obvious reasons, because the IRS sucks, So it's like when we start moving to this digital currency, it's good and bad that come along with it. I'm not one of those people that's a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not one of those people that think, oh my God, Bitcoin's great. I'm one of those people that's like, look, Bitcoin's price is going to go up in the future and I'm hedging my bets.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the most practical way is to view it as a great hedge. I mean, that's what I see. You're talking about them wanting to adopt Bitcoin to violate privacy, obviously, and to be able to track our transactions. I have a much bigger fear of that with the inevitable digital dollar and digital yuan and central bank digital currencies. I mean, that's like a wet dream for a central bank, right? We've already talked about all the problems with the central bank. Imagine when they have perfect control of the money supply. They know where every single penny and dollar is. They want your taxes. It comes directly out of your account, right? They don't ask what they owe. They take it directly out. They want to know what you sent to your kid for their birthday. They see it, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that's a much bigger threat than even their involvement in Bitcoin personally.
Yeah. What I'd like to see from the Bitcoin community is a lot less of this worship of the cryptocurrencies and more or less paying attention to how the cryptocurrency is being choked. Like I said, I have to pay $30,000 in fees just to open up a Bitcoin exchange. And that's basically goes against everything Bitcoin was supposed to be created for, right? And you're supposed to free the money, and we haven't freed the money. We put the money in prison. When SEC gets to SEC was never supposed to control cryptocurrency. It was never supposed to control Bitcoin, but it does here in America, right? Like and that's why Binance left, right? Like, I'm not screw this, I'm out, right? And I don't blame them.
Nobody in crypto wants to touch the United States,
right? So it's like, everybody's running around on Bitcoin Twitter and like, Bitcoin is Bitcoin cryptocurrency and buy Ethereum, And I'm like, all right, you guys are lauding this thing and it's fine, whatever. But where is the committee? Where is the legal board that's going to go repeal some of these regulations and say, hey, this goes against the white paper. This goes against everything Satoshi's dreamed of. And let's tell the SEC, mind your damn business. This isn't for that, right? And these things are like the SEC is basically anti-constitutional. And it's like, where's your legal team to combat this stuff? It sucks that I go to somebody, they say, oh yeah, I'm a crypto attorney. Okay, cool. And, I want to open an exchange. Okay, it's going to cost $30,000 to do that. And it's like, well, what are you doing in the meantime as an attorney? Are you fighting to repeal some of these regulations? Or are you just studying them so we can be compliant? And I'd like to see somebody step up and fund some sort of board or committee of attorneys to go fight this stuff. Where are those brave guys doing that? Because right now, Bitcoin's not free, unless you open up a VPN.
Right. I mean, they can't control Bitcoin itself, but they can certainly control every on and off ramp and every regulation around it, make it impossible to get to the dollars. And then you can't spend the Bitcoin anyways, because they're going to tax you if you buy coffee and say that you sold your Bitcoin. It's so absurd. And the United States is the worst. But it's interesting. I was on a webinar yesterday with a guy from Nomura, which is like 100-year-old, huge financial institution from Japan. And we were talking about institutional adoption and these ideas that we were just talking about, Wall Street being involved in big money. And his contention basically was like, they don't really want to touch Bitcoin. They just want to be like the picks and shovels guys. They want to control the exchanges. They want to invest in the companies that we're all going to be using to transact in Bitcoin or anything Bitcoin based. They don't really need to own it if they own your access to it, was basically his point.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the inception of the money men, right? The money men were like, hey, look, what do you know about issuing bonds? And what do you know about minting money? And then they position themselves as middlemen. And that's where the power is. It's about, okay, fine, you want this currency to exist? Cool. But you got to go through me, right?
Yeah.
And these people, these money men who have existed throughout the centuries, these are the same people, the same exact families that were huge in Europe banking are the same ones that exist today, and the same ones that are controlling a lot of the banks today. So, this is a very ancient problem, but they understand money. They created this system of money. They created monetary policy. They created modern capitalism. So they're going to have much more mastery over it than the general public or anybody else that thinks that they can outsmart them. And they're going to change the rules whenever they see fit. So obviously they see this thing coming, and I personally believe that they created Bitcoin. The SHA-256 algorithm was created by the NSA. We don't know who Satoshi is. It damn sure ain't that white dude that claims it's him.
Right.
Yeah, I don't mention his name. But I believe that it was created by them.
And why do you believe that? Just because it was another way to control money supply, or was it to give us hope so they could crush it later? I mean,
Well, like Alex Jones said, it was the idea of getting people comfortable with moving to a one world digital currency. And then that feeds into the whole one world government thing, right? Because then if you have one currency, that means you need one overarching body to create worldwide regulation for this thing. And that's what this creates an excuse for. It's like, well, we have this currency that's being traded across borders. It's like, okay, well, now we have an excuse to create this body to control monetary policy across borders. And then after that, it's just like more of an excuse to open up more NWO type entities.
Well, all that said, you open a Bitcoin exchange, right?
Yes.
So why and how?
Because I'm no dummy, I'm no dummy. Like, if you know something is inevitable, you have two options. You either hate it and go against it, or you bet on it, right? And I know the public is stupid, and I know that Bitcoin is going to be the future. I know that cryptocurrencies will be future. The New World Order, they're going to control all this stuff. They have been for centuries. So, you're either going to fight it, which is going to be a worthless fight because it's just going to be you alone. It's not like you're going to have the public on your side because they're ignorant and they don't even understand, a lot of these things. So it's just like, I have to think about my family first and foremost. So what am I supposed to tell? I got a daughter on it. I'm supposed to tell my daughter that she has to go work for somebody because her daddy believes in this conspiracy of one world digital currency. So he's like saying, oh, no, I'm not going to participate. So my daughter, when I could just say, you know what, it's coming, I'm going to hedge my bets. And at least my daughter doesn't have to work for somebody. Right. So it's like, I'm looking out for my damn self, and I'm looking out for the people around me. Like, look, this thing is coming. Y'all might want to get in because ain't nobody stopping it.
Yeah, I believe that Bitcoin is you can't save money anymore, right? Because I mean, it's losing buying power every single day. So right. At the very least, I view Bitcoin as a savings account. I talk about what you're talking about all the time. I just put it aside, and my kids can hopefully use it in 30 years. You know what I mean? I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and to me, that's the best hedge for saving money for them. Yes, just like you just said. Maybe buying some land.
Yeah. That's another good investment, right? But I have to think about. You have to take very practical approaches. When you play the game Monopoly, you don't say, "Oh, this game is corrupt, I'm not going to participate." You take your $200 when you pass go and you buy some houses. Yeah, you take your free parking money, right? And you play the game to win. And like I said before, I know the game exists. I'm not interested in trying to tear down the system. I'm very interested in mastering the system and showing people, look, they created this game. It's silly, but if you play by the rules, the game's not exactly hard, So I'm an objective person. I can look at something and say, yo, this shit is trash, but I'm going to benefit off of it too, right? And if there's a personality flaw with that, I'll accept that criticism. But again, I refuse to be poor.
So what other businesses have you started? I know you've got a few.
Yeah. So we have coinbitsapp.com. That is an on-ramp for people who don't want to take the route of getting a wallet, going through the exchanges and learning the finite details. It's a good way to start getting into Bitcoin really fast, right? And it's one of the cheapest solutions because we only charge $1 per transaction. Excuse me. So let me just go ahead and shout out Maher and Youssef, the founders of that company, and thank them for making me a co-founder in that company. And we're close to managing almost $1 million in assets, which
Great.
is our first huge milestone. Then I have Jiffitize, which is an app that empowers content creators by allowing them to download GIFs and videos directly from the Twitter platform to an iOS device, because you're not currently able to do that on the iOS device. An Android version coming soon. Shout out to my co-founder who founded the company, Simone Bees, and made me a co-founder in that company. And then there's Wazo AI. Wazo AI, what we do is camera vision analytics. So anything that passes in front of the camera, we can provide data and analytics on that's that. Cool. Yeah. So that's a software and hardware company, because there's a hardware component attached to it that we install our software to, and we're able to process a lot of these functions on the edge. And then I'm working with another company started by Arlo, Bloom AI, where we're using AI to blend and create new faces.
Deep fakes.
Yeah,
sometimes I look at those things and I'm like, I really just can't tell who it's supposed to be, but some of them are so good, But deep fakes. So, it's so scary though.
It is, right? So
you're not going to be able to believe any video that you see ever again when they perfect it.
Right. So,
but you might as well be in control of it, right?
that goes back to my point. It's like things are going to happen, and you are either going to be a victim of it or you're going to be empowered by it. I don't plan on being a victim. If I know deep fakes are coming, well, look, I'm going to learn how this deep fake stuff works, and I'm going to be able to empower people with the power of deep fakes. And then by being in these industries, I can watch and see what's trending and what's happening and what's coming. And then I can move accordingly so I can be ahead of the curve. So yeah, deep fakes, camera vision, Bitcoin, content creation. I want it all.
So you're not getting a job. You're not going to work for someone. You said you don't want your daughter to work for somebody. So what do you say to people who are, quote unquote wage slaves, or people who, have low paying jobs and are in that cycle and can't escape it? Because obviously, I mean, you believe in being an entrepreneur and making your own way. Mm-hmm. How can an average person who needs to pay those bills and needs to make it happen, how can they escape that, that grind?
Well, there's two ways, right? One is investing 50% of your income in investments. And after 10 years, you'll be able to retire. Based upon some of the calculations I've seen, you can retire in maybe 10 to 20 years, and maybe even 15 with a Walmart salary. If you
live lean. Yeah.
If you live lean and don't have kids, right? And even if you have kids, I think there's still ways to live lean and still invest a large portion of your money. But I'm talking about cashing out a few million at the end of that period, right? And because of compound interest and compound gains. The other way is starting up a business. You can do passive income things like starting a blog, starting a YouTube channel. You have a lot of people out here making a lot of money off of YouTube, 6-figure incomes off of YouTube,
easy,
6-figure incomes off of Twitch, right? And that's where the future is going, right? Everybody talks about UBI and robots taking jobs, and really what's going to happen, I forget who said this, was not an original thought of mine, but we've seen it in the movies, is where it just comes down to humans entertaining other humans. So entertainment's going to be it's going to grow. We're doing it right now, right? Everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got a stream, everybody's open up, where before this wasn't possible. You had to go through the TV networks and the powers that be. Kind of lost where I was going with this thought.
It's interesting because what you just touched on. So you're talking about you used to have to go through the mainstream outlets if you wanted to have a voice, right? You've been on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
He's the perfect example of someone who basically extricated himself from that and created his own media empire. Like he cannot be canceled.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, his audience is bigger than some of these networks. So, I mean, that's what I think a lot of us here are trying to somewhat create our own lane where we have an audience.
Yeah. So getting back to my thought, to answer your question, like as far as like entrepreneurship is concerned, I think it first has to come down to the want and desire to be an entrepreneur. And, you know, you can do something as simple as flipping cars, man. You know, you go and get, you know, you hit these auctions, you can get like a really nice car cheap. You know, your friend's a mechanic, he can, you know, fix it up a little bit. And then they got like apps like Carvana where you can sell a car in like 24 hours, right? Yeah. So, you know, you go buy something cheap and then you flip it, right? Like I think it's called arbitrage, right? So
these dudes are making crazy money on Pokemon cards now, like billions. Billions.
Yeah. So
find your lane and hustle.
Basically. Yeah. I think, you know, there's plenty of ways to get money, but I think it's about creating many streams of passive income. You know, I think that you have to start at the bottom when you're not born into wealth, right? So I think it first starts with, like Booker T. Washington first says, you know, we got to start with some sort of relevant skill. So whether it's fixing cars, mechanic, engineering, digital marketing, you got to get some sort of skill. So I think what happens is these W-2 wage jobs are really what I would call apprenticeship. And then you graduate from that apprenticeship by opening your own business because you're losing money by being at work. Because if you paid more attention to your other streams of income, you would make way more money than being at these jobs. So I think if you're at a job, you need to be figuring out like, what are some other streams of income? Because if you lose your job, you ain't got nothing coming in, right?
But that's what I'm saying. It has to happen like on the clock. You need to build something on the side and eventually escape it, or you have to somehow have the capital to do it before you even get stuck in that, you know, on that hamster wheel or whatever. It's interesting. You touched on something, you know, Booker T. Washington saying that you need to learn a trade. I think one of the craziest things and one of the biggest issues in this country, and maybe it's purposeful, is that we don't teach financial literacy.
Yeah.
Like you went down the path, you understand compound interest, you understand these things. Why isn't that taught in third grade?
Yeah, because the powers that be, for example, it's the Rockefellers were responsible with turning public education over to the government. So once you have progressives controlling and you have the ruling class, I mean, who was it that spoke to, there's a philosopher that was an assistant to Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great, you know, had these big ideas for his country and for his nation. And he wanted to educate people. And I forget the philosopher that stood next to him, but he said, no, you don't want that. You want a dumb public, you know?
Yeah, it's like religion is the opiate of the mass. I mean, there's thousands of quotes about those things, about keeping the population obviously in the dark.
Yeah, because if people understood financial policy, who's going to come work in your factory? You know, I did this thought experiment with my children. I pulled up at Chick-fil-A and we bought some Chick-fil-A, and there was a whole bunch of workers. And I asked my kids, I said, why is it that these people work here at Chick-fil-A? Do you think it's a choice? And we went around the car and everybody had some really interesting points. Some people said, well, that's what makes them happy. And other ones were like, they don't know any other way. Right. But by keeping those people ignorant, you keep those low wage jobs full. Right. And then not only that, it gives you an excuse to create socialist programs because the living wage is so low, the cost of living is so high that you're going to need some sort of government assistance. So it creates the need for state interference. So, you know, the powers that be are very clever in saying, like, why would we educate these people? But again, I think that the onus is on us as influencers to go out and educate people. And some people don't want the education. It's fine. You want to work at, you know, Buffalo Wild Wings your whole life. That's cool. Or you want to spend your money on Jordans instead of taking that same $100 you spend weekly and putting it in Bitcoin or putting it in the stock market. You know, you're going to have to work the rest of your life, you know, but I think what happens is it puts people in a bubble, right? For example, up until a few years ago, I never even heard the name Andrew Breitbart. I had never heard about the publication Breitbart until they did an article on us. And you can very easily be closed off from information by being in these circles, right? For example, if I ask you, have you ever heard of John Henrik Clarke?
No, I have not.
Right. So this is one of the first and foremost and purveyors of African-American history, very important person. But if you're not connected to Hotep Jesus, you're never exposed to that name, which means there's a whole set of historical facts that you would never know about unless you spoke to me, right?
Of course. I mean, history is written by the winners, right? To some degree. I mean, everybody knows that. So there's a whole other history that they certainly never would teach us in school. And you go to a different country and there's a opposite history to learn. I mean, history is almost like arbitrary. It's not fact.
Right. So, you never being exposed to me wouldn't get you access to some sort of knowledge. And that's exactly what happens with finance. If somebody's not exposed to like Crypto Wendy Yo or you or Crypto Blood or Bitcoin Zay, they would never even know about Bitcoin, right? Because all of their friends online are talking about Megan Thee Stallion, NFL, NBA. So we're in that bubble of entertainment. And until somebody enters that bubble and introduces a new thought, they're never going to be exposed to it. So people are closed off, just like rural areas are closed off to the rest of us, just like information is.
It's so true. Yeah. There's something you said earlier that I really like, because I asked you, how do we change the system? And you said, you master the system. Yeah. Because like as a trader, going back, it just everything you say like reminds me of like, I can see that you're a very good trader, because clearly like you're not emotionally attached to any of it. And you see it for what it is. But it is really interesting because people always talk about how manipulated Bitcoin is, right? Yeah. And I always joke, like, it's like the least manipulated thing. They think manipulation is because some dude with a lot of money can dump on you. Yeah. And control the market. Yeah. To me, that's an opportunity to like ride on that guy's back. Yeah. No, but like I just want to, like, the whole point of trading is to just be on the side of the big guy and not be the little one that gets crushed. Right. And you've seen that with Wall Street as well. Yeah. So I mean, Wall Street's manipulated. That's like, as you talk about crony capitalism, money pumping. I mean, they black boxes. Yeah. I mean, it's like insane. Yeah. Bitcoin isn't. Bitcoin's a free market. People just get mad when they lose and think that it's been manipulated against them. But I think that that's a mentality that people take to everything.
Well, again, that goes back to the fact that they don't understand. They've never had any sort of traditional investing training or education, right? Because you can't lose on an investment until you sell. So why'd your dumb ass sell? You should have bought more when it was down.
It's always the bottom, though. They always sell at the bottom. It's always the dead bottom. Yeah. It's like the greatest tell when you need to buy something is when you're panicking to get out of it.
Yeah. Like I put a bunch of money in Tron, right? And I'm down on it, right? But I'm not even thinking about it, right? I'm just like, I'll just sit on it. And if it comes back, it comes back. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And even when it comes back, I'm probably still going to sit on it until I can just pass it on to my kids, because the amount of money I put into it was nominal. It was nothing.
Well, I mean, that's the key to investing too, right? Is like the way to detach the emotion is for it not to be like your house payment.
Right. Yeah. You never want to, invest something that I think what's the name said never invest what you're afraid
money
to lose.
You can't afford to lose. Yeah. Only invest what you can afford to lose. Yeah. It's like the most, but that doesn't, I mean, that is true. And I would definitely advise that, but that also means that like you need to live a life where you can afford to lose a little more, because you're not gonna be able to invest 50% of your salary if you're like trying to, live like you're in a music video.
Right. Yeah.
Like what people can afford to lose is relative to how much they're willing to give up to live their lifestyle. It kind of goes back to what you said before.
Yeah. Like I was looking at my friend back when ICOs were, everybody was pumping and dumping ICOs, right? In 2017. And we had a talk and I was interested. I was like, oh, wow, I see you making all this money, pumping up in ICOs. And she's like, yeah, how are you doing it? I'm like, oh, I'm investing long-term. She's like, you're holding? I'm like, yeah. She's like, nah, you got to get these ICOs. And lo and behold, a few months later, she's like, I'm never going to do this again. That's like how much money I lost. It's like, you gave them back those gains. And this is somebody who didn't have. Now, today, she teaches this same long-term investing strategy I was telling her about in 2017, right? So when she told me about what she was doing in ICOs, and I learned about that pump and dump ICOs, I was like, I don't think I'm going to touch this. This doesn't seem like the type of thing for me. I'm just going to pick something. Because I think Warren Buffett said, never buy a security that you're not willing to hold for 10 years, So, I bought Twitter stock 5 years ago and shit still got it.
He also said that the market is a mechanism for transferring the wealth from the impatient to the patient, right?
Yes.
Smart guy. And he only buys things that give yield and can compound his gains. Yeah. Smart guy, knows what he's doing, I would say. Yeah, I mean, the ICO thing and all this DeFi and all this, I mean, people are getting really rich, but it's like 1 in 1,000 people. Someone always gets left holding the bag. Right. I was on a live stream yesterday and we were looking at the Bitcoin chart and I counted it back because I was looking at the monthly chart and seeing that price has very rarely been above where it is today. Even though we all remember 20,000, it was 10,000 to 20,000 and back in 1 month, right? Yeah. So there's only been 46 days in the history of Bitcoin in 11 years where it's ever traded higher than the price today. So if you were an investor and a dollar cost averager or any of the conservative investing strategies that people talk about, there's only 46 times that you could have bought ever where you would be down. Yeah. And that would only be if you never bought more when it dropped.
Everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but I have a large set of users who joined Coinbits app early on, and they post screenshots. This one guy was like, "Yo, my Coinbits app is outperforming my 401k."
Oh yeah. I don't even look at my stuff. I mean, I trade like whatever, but like my like IRAs and stuff, it's on autopilot, and I'll check it once a year and make sure nothing really garbage happened. But I check my Bitcoin portfolio every single day.
Do you? Okay. Yeah, I don't check any
trading.
of my
You know what I mean?
I don't check. Yeah. The only thing I check is the price of gold.
And why is that?
Because I play options on it.
Oh, you play options on gold.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think right now?
I'm in it. I missed the last in. I played Nugget, NUGT, which is a fund, and it's quite volatile. And I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago, it hit like $82 or something like that. And I'm like, ooh, I should get in because it's probably going to spike to 90. And I felt myself FOMO. So I have a rule: if I feel FOMO, I don't bet.
Don't do it. Yep.
So I didn't, but lo and behold, it happened. It went up to 94, and I'm like, oh, I just missed like 10K right there.
Yeah, but
right?
9 times out of 10 it goes to 72, and you're like, what did I do, man? We all know. Like, you remember the ones you miss, but you don't give yourself much credit for the ones where you like decided not to do it, and it goes the other way, man. So listen, I know we're up against it here with time. Where can everybody follow you, keep up with you after this?
Yeah, I would go to bryansharpe.co, BRYANSHARPE.co. Get on my email list. I have a daily email newsletter that gives you all the updates about my life. I give tips on how to maneuver this thing we call life on various subjects, including and mainly entrepreneurship.
I think that's really useful, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. I've been following you for a long time, and definitely, man, you're as unique as they come. So it's good to get it. We'll have to do this again. It's rare that you meet someone who's actually willing to say the things that you do or have the perspectives that you do. So whether people agree or don't agree, it's nice to see someone speak their mind for sure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Great interview.